do this for about 20 minutes and then really want to be here for you guys. We have a small room so we can answer questions, talk about it. I've been in this space a long time. So to start, what is Hawke.AI? What is Hawke Media? So Hawke Media is an outsourced CMO and marketing team to about 600 brands. So we run marketing for a little over 600 different companies, big and small. The idea being we found that in the marketing industry, there were no agencies that were actually good at what they did, but also easy to work with. Really simple mission. We wanted to be the best at what we do, easy to work with, flexible, nimble, cost effective, and it's worked. We got about 300 full-time people. And thankfully, almost a decade ago, I came in touch with a guy named Ray Kurzweil and another guy named Peter Diamandis. Ray Kurzweil ended up running AI at Google. Peter Diamandis is also known for his work in innovation. And they explained to me what AI was going to be and how this was actually going to manifest, not in terms of like the Terminator, but actually pragmatically what it would look like. And it became very obvious once you understood the research that was happening there, what was coming. And that looked like ChatGPT. We didn't know it would actually be ChatGPT specifically, but that some big multi-billion-dollar company was going to come out and have this node that people could plug into that would be this AI brain. And the predictions, Ray Kurzweil published a paper, I think it was in 2013, that predicted that by the beginning of 2023, computers would finally be at the point that they could replicate human intelligence. It wouldn't be artificial intelligence. That would take another 6 years, so 2029. But by the beginning of 2023, it would feel like human intelligence. And ChatGPT launched in November of 22. So a 9-year prediction that seemed pretty damn accurate. Worked out for us because we went, okay, well, what does that mean for marketing? And so that's when we started developing Hawke.AI. And what it is the main point we needed is we knew we weren't going to be the ones to develop the brain. We weren't going to be the ones that actually jumped in and created, again, the main node, the ChatGPT, the Gemini. I figured that would be a Google at the time, a Google or a Facebook or an Amazon. Obviously, it ended up being Microsoft with the first move, but we knew that we had unique ability to plug into that. So if you're going to have artificial intelligence, what can I do specifically to teach it something different so I create a unique advantage? And this is something I wanted to share just because as you're thinking through your own businesses, what is it that you have that other people don't? And where is your advantage that you can then plug into AI and actually create something much more powerful? And so for us, for a long time now, we've been around 11 years, we were working with lots and lots and lots of different brands and seeing lots and lots of data. And so we decided, this is a decade ago, let's start keeping that data, anonymizing it, but allowing us to see at scale what is happening in the marketing industry. Let's create our own benchmarks, because my assumption was, and so far it's been correct, the companies that have more data than us would be Google, Meta, Amazon, not even Amazon because it's their own platform, kind of Shopify, but in Magento, but in terms of data that they would actually utilize for something like this and tell you things like maybe you should move off of Meta or maybe you shouldn't spend money on Google. None of them will ever want to tell you that. So we decided to create that third party and start collecting a lot of data. And now fast forward, it's actually a little over 6,000 brands and a little over $600 million in ad spend managed on an annual basis that we're able to plug in and track performance across all different industries, all these different companies, and then plug in an individual company and quickly assess a SWOT analysis of what's going on in their performance marketing. And that's where we saw our advantage. It's a niche advantage, but the idea was this is where we can save hours a day of research on a brand where you're trying to figure out what's going right, what's going wrong, how do we change this, where should we be focusing on? And honestly, one of the key examples of where we saw this being useful, we had a client, this was 2016. We took them in 2015, they did about $350,000 in revenue. 2016, they did 15 million. It was a great example of like what we did worked, company really grew fast. And then overnight, their ad performance on Facebook dropped 1/8 of what it was. Their ROAS went down by 7/8. It was like a horrible drop in performance. And I didn't hear about it for a couple of weeks. My team was working on it, and all the client kept saying, it's a beauty company, hey, fix our Facebook ads. Obviously, you did a bad job. You're targeting the wrong people. Like, it's not converting. And my team's just, frankly, at the time was doing what they're told. We've developed better processes now. But they were going in and changing copy, creative, targeting, just trying to make Facebook work better. Finally, I caught wind of it, and so I jumped in and looked. And I looked at their Facebook click-through rate. It was the same. We were targeting similar people. The conversion rate was what dropped. And so and the CPM was the same. So I'm like, so we're still getting people to the site at the same cost. It's the site that's not converting, and we're targeting the same audience. So we shouldn't see this kind of a drop. Like, sure, things ebb and flow, but something's broken. So I said, did you change your website at all? And they're like, no, not really. I'm like, not really. What did you change? Like, we just updated a couple banners. Turns out one of those banners, they forgot to size it down. So their load speed of their site on mobile went from 1 second to 8 seconds. Um, it took 2 weeks of back and forth with them, with my team. Took me diving in and spending a few hours to figure out, like, well, that didn't work, and doing the, like, kind of, why is that broken? And then what happened there to finally identify this. Okay, I can do that instantly. So it's like, here's your problem. We have a flagging system that's literally on the homepage when you log in. It's like, here's what's going really well, because for a couple reasons we had to add that. I'll go to that in a sec. But here's what's going really poorly. Your click-through rate on these ads are 20% below market. This is where you should look at. And benchmarking is really the key here, because we see this all the time. Like 98% of CMOs seem to get their benchmarks by calling a friend and being like, what are you seeing in your ROAS? And then they go, oh, they're getting 3x. We're only getting 2.5, so we need to do better. And then they hammer their agency or their ad manager, like, we need to do better. These guys are getting 3x or 10x or whatever someone says on the day of. And actually knowing what the market is doing is really helpful. We've seen it with people looking at their Google ads, like, and I'll go into something I'm going to do here just for making this valuable is show you actually where the numbers are year over year for different industries. But we see, like, when you know that the cost on Google has gone up 20%, your decision-making process is very different. It's not like, oh, my cost is up 20%, so I'm doing something wrong. If Google raised their prices and you now know that, because they don't announce that, you can decide it's not about optimizing Google better. You probably are doing just fine. It's just, do I still spend on Google? Is this still worth it for me? Or do I move my money somewhere else that isn't gouging me? It's those kind of things that you're able to make these decisions. The other side, we found that CMOs did not want to use Hawke.AI because having a giant glaring scorecard of everything you're screwing up was not the most palatable thing. So we added where you're outperforming. So now it says both. So it actually shows where you're overperforming and doing really well as well. So it can help you identify where your time should be spent. But we also found that actually the sort of unforeseen benefit of that is now we also know where to double down. We can see, like, oh, look, you have, let's say, a 20% better than normal click-through rate on these ads. Okay, so we did something better than average. Like, what did we do there? How can we double down on that? Should we put more of our money towards that because that's where we're outperforming? So that's how we've built this out. And again, I wanted to go into trends, and then we'll talk more about where AI is going. And I'm going to leave about 10 minutes for Q&A. So, and there's some interesting stats here. So Google, they increased their cost by about 67% on CPM. Click-through rates, though, about doubled on Google because there's just more quality, less traffic. They're also fixing bots and things. So CPC also increased about 32%. This is year over year. Meta increased 20%. Their conversion rates are up 32%, and ROAS overall is up 17%. So, on Meta, they're increasing the price, but the returns are better. So they're getting more targeted. They're doing better. I think this is probably a consequence of the changes that happened in 2021 with iOS 14. They're getting better at recovering a lot of their tracking and a lot of their better targeting. So even though they're increasing their costs or their pricing, it's performing better. And honestly, like, when you're dealing with high advertising costs, I'll skim through this because you probably know, but the idea is to just increase engagement, increase that the nurturing side of things. Like, there's ways to combat higher ads or higher CPMs, higher ad costs aren't necessarily bad for your business. You have to remember that it's a level landscape. Everyone's dealing with the same thing. When they're raising prices across everything, focusing on optimization and being better at that actually allows you to win in a competitive landscape. So we actually don't see any of this as necessarily like a bad thing as long as you're the best. You're competing with the person next to you. It's that old joke of two guys are standing in the woods, a bear starts charging him, one bends down to tie his shoes. He goes, you can't outrun a bear. He's like, I don't have to outrun a bear, I have to outrun you. Think about that when these things are happening. Like, everyone's dealing with the same thing. How do I beat all of them? Not, oh, what do I do about this in a vacuum? So some of the benchmarks, I can send this around. I'll put my email in the WhatsApp group. So there'll be a couple things I can share if anybody wants it. But again, ROAS is down on Google for the past year. It's getting better on Meta. What's been interesting that we've seen is average order value, which this is just a standard average order, again, across 6,000 brands. This is kind of the standard ballpark of where you sit. Something really interesting that I wanted to tap into on average order value, it's really correlated with purchase cycle, which is probably the number one most missed thing. I'll get into more of that when we get into some of the other slides. But one of the most missed things about e-commerce is your sales cycle, your purchase cycle, the consideration period. So on average, someone takes time to buy something. it's intuition. Everybody understands that. But then when you look at your advertising and marketing, everybody looks at how much did I spend today and how much did I make today. It's a completely misleading metric. In fact, because of those iOS changes a few years ago, Facebook and Meta can still only track 7 days. iPhone deletes those cookies after 7 days. So you cannot track most of your traffic's on mobile like everybody. You have no tracking ability. So what's interesting, and there's some stats in here that show this, because of that, the average sales cycle for someone at a $50 purchase is about 3 weeks. $100 is about 5 weeks, $200 about 6 weeks, and it trails off between 2 and 3 months. But at $138 average order value, you're over a month average sales cycle for e-commerce products. And so knowing that, and we can only track 7 days, you have to find other ways to track how that return is. Because if you're just using the native platform on Meta, you're getting a really underreported metric, which is fascinating to me with why Meta does that. I still don't understand it, but they're underreporting how well it's doing. And so you have to build better infrastructure to track it if you want to compete. Going back to the bear metaphor, other people are tracking that correctly and are able to spend more because they understand their return cycles. Whereas people that are just reading it in Meta, seeing underperformance, they cut it off, and it turns out they actually shouldn't have. And we've seen that happen a lot. So just some by industry. So I think this was the stat I wanted to refer to. No, this isn't it. I'm trying to find this. There was one stat that highlighted this very well. So cost per click is up. Conversion rate has also increased, which allows the return on ad spend has actually increased as well. Because one thing about this, beauty has a very short sales cycle. People can buy a lot faster. I think it was this one. Cost per click decreased. Yes, this is it. So think about from a math perspective. Cost per click decreased by 4%. Conversion rate is up by 13%. So the costs they're spending less to get someone to their site and they're converting at a higher rate, but their returns are down 28%. Rationally, that makes absolutely no sense if you think about the math of that. So I looked into this. As my team thankfully made these slides, when I saw this, I was like, that does not make sense. What happened here? Sales cycle on CPG went up. So food and beverage, people take time. You're ingesting something, you take time to think about buying it. It turns out over the past year, people have taken more time to think about their spend. So what happens here, our data is collected directly from Meta, from Google, from the platforms directly, because what we wanted to do is make sure we're comparing clean data. Because if we were just collecting it from their own reporting or whatever way they like to look at their data, obviously it wouldn't be comparable. So we take this directly out of Google and out of Meta. Google also has the same sales cycle problem. So when the sales cycle increased, this looked like they had a worse ROAS. And why I highlight this, it is super important because you probably all have marketers or yourselves have looked at your return on ad spend and seen it go down. And it might not actually be the case. Because again, over time, if your cost per click is lower and your conversion rate on your site is higher, it is going to pencil out. It just might not report correctly in Google, which is what happened here. And home and garden, if you guys are in that space, I can, again, share these slides. So I can give you these. Healthcare. These are just different categories we have. We have basically all the Google Analytics categories broken out. Some different strategies to look at. Personalization's been talked about a lot, but it's been underutilized still. And with AI, you can lean into it heavily. I mean, we're now looking at like, how do we send to everybody an individual email based on their activity on social media? Because it can do that instantly and cost very little. And having that, it's a balance a little bit. What we're finding is sometimes it looks like AI. And that is part of the issue when you have AI creating creative, whether it's copy or imagery, it still feels like AI. And people understand that now. And so it almost has an adverse effect of inauthenticity, where it's like, yeah, we get what you're using. A lot of people are using it for prospecting and it's causing bad effects too, where you're emailing them like, hey, we just saw that you celebrated this and you did this and you did that. It's like, cool, you had AI scrape my social media feed and saw the 3 things I just did. Like, thank you. But like, I know you didn't do that personally. So, but recommendations really helpful. On the e-commerce side, again, these are basics that I just always like to cover. Product listing ads, seasonality is really important. If you can give people a reason to buy, why to buy now, these are just things to keep top of mind that I always like to share. Like whether it's, again, the holidays are obviously easy, but Valentine's Day, different holidays are great, different times of year, and then make up stuff. Like the idea is to create some reason, not just be like, hey, here's our product, you should buy it, but like, why should I buy it now? Is actually something that I think a lot of people lose in their advertising that becomes important, as well as dynamic retargeting is getting better and better. Again, the cookie changes in 2021 made it a lot harder, but people are starting to now figure out how to get around that, how to figure out other ways to have first-party data so you can retarget properly. Again, increasing engagement, going back to the sales cycle side of things. If you know that your customer is going to take a month or more to buy something, most people don't think about that from a marketing strategy standpoint. And we have basics, and we're all in the same e-commerce industry. Email marketing, SMS marketing, these are all things that focus on that sales cycle, but being very intentional with understanding, like, if you are going to have a 5-week sales cycle, what do I do during those 5 weeks that actually get someone to go from I know who you are to actually purchasing, and really creating more of interaction, building that trust, and really focusing on that. And then obviously optimization, always focusing on building better funnels, really looking at your ads, really trying to like hone that. But the thing I would caution is don't focus on optimization first. The idea, like we always like to say, at our company, like 80% in shipped is better than 100%. Like get things done, get the big buckets covered before you start focusing on optimization. We've looked at companies that are doing, say, $100,000 a month in revenue, and they're focusing on getting that 1% better conversion rate. It's like you're going to spend the next 6 weeks to make $1,000. Like, don't do that. Focus on the big buckets first, and then when it's time, when you see that the returns on optimization can be there, that's when it's time to start really optimizing. So that's some basics. Now the future of AI marketing, and this is really fun. So we've, the nice thing is we developed our thesis before it was in reality, and it seems to match up. So what's interesting is the things that are getting the news and the attention in AI are the things that are more visual, that are more consumer driven, like ChatGPT, and it can write all my blog posts. It can create, look at what's it called, Midjourney. It can create images, and now even ChatGPT can. I can tell it to draw a picture of me. I tried to have Grok do a selfie of me, and it was horrible. By the way, I was like, that's supposed to be like my Twitter headshot was right there. I'm looking at this picture. I'm like, that doesn't look like me. But the point is, if you think about how AI works, it's all logic driven. And so it's all if and then statements. It's, calling it AI. And one of my favorite lines, a very successful tech guy in LA said it's AAAI. It's artificial intelligence. It's not there yet. And so what is there is replacing remedial tasks, any type of logic driven tasks. And really, like, what I like to, the metaphor we use internally, that because we're leveraging AI, we don't just have our own platform. We're looking at tons of other platforms. We also have a venture fund. We have over 100 portfolio companies. And a lot of we're looking at AI now because it's just an aspect of tech you really need to assess. And it all comes down to, what would an army of 17-year-old interns be able to take on? Like, that metaphor has been the easy one, because would I have an army of 17-year-old interns do all my copy and creative for my company? Absolutely not. Can I have them do some prompts so that I can come in and go, oh, those are good ideas, now let's run with it and make it good? Absolutely. Would I have them synthesize a ton of data and show them how, obviously, but be like, I need to break this down and do the math, so all this shows me this? Absolutely. Like, again, if you have a bunch of fresh out of high school or still in high school kids that are ready, and I'd say maybe it's made it to college level at this point, that have no experience, and you're like, what could I have all these people do? That's where we get into, like, again, the data analysis, the logic driven side of things. Legal is obviously really great, because can I hand them, just stacks of case law and just say, hey, find me a case that relates to this and tell me how it relates to this. And, again, I don't want you to use your brain in terms of like try to put it together. I just want you to show me the information in a concise way without me having to go read tons of textbooks or search for it. It's that kind of thing that becomes really valuable in AI right now. And so thinking with your business, where do I have a ton of tedium, a ton of tasks that, like, if I did have access to a bunch of, let's just say 20-year-olds in this case, what that I would throw them at to have them do, and how can I have AI do that? That is the way to think about how this is going, and that's with marketing too. It's going to be a long time, I believe, before creative and copy and that side of things is replaced by AI. When I hear people tell me that they're replaced their whole content team with ChatGPT or Claude or one of these, I assume their content must have been really mediocre. Like, it's just the case. Like, it's not good content. If you can absolutely publish a paper, you can absolutely get a bunch of research. You also have to deal with the legality of, are you allowed to use that or not? But it's not, if you're trying to create something really special, really unique, remember, back to the bear metaphor, you're competing with other people. If all of you are using ChatGPT to create your content, no one's going to care about your content. Your content is useless at that point. So then how do you stand out? How do you set yourself apart becomes important. So again, over the next decade, I think but a decade from now it might be different. So when you think about creative, we talk a lot about, the nuance, the gut feeling, that creative process. We think of it as this special thing. And honestly, through a lot of reflection, through a lot of studying it, when we are all pulling from things that we've experienced in life, that we've seen, like whether it's a musician writing a new song, whether it's someone creating a piece of art. It comes from some sort of inspiration, and we call that creativity, but it's because our brains aren't complex enough to really digest where did that come from. We don't have the ability to go, oh, I liked that color because one time I saw a car painted that color, and I liked that phrase because I heard it at a conference I was sitting at in Florida. Like, there's things you don't know where it came from, but it's sitting in your brain, and it's all turns into this inspiration that when you put it together, it's creative. I do believe that AI will get there. I do believe there will be a point where it can go, oh, these are all the places that we can pull from, and this is what we can create. And it's already doing that. But again, it feels very formulaic, but it's going to get more complex. And at some point, creative will happen that way. And what we do at that point will be interesting because I heard this metaphor. Was that? I'm trying. Oh, it was from the movie, the TV show Silicon Valley. Anyone watch that show? So really, this is funny. This just popped up, but it was a really good example of how AI is going to progress. So he talks about when everybody moved into cities during the industrialization of the United States, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they were all still riding horses. And so it was predicted that by the mid 1900s, there would be 9 feet of horse manure on the streets because of how much this population was growing and how many horses would be needed as people migrated into the cities. What they didn't anticipate was a car. And so the idea is with AI, we don't know what problems are going to be solved, what's going to change. But what I think has become sort of a fallacy that we can actually breathe a little easier on is that it's going to replace all jobs and we're going to be screwed. Because what's going to happen is it's going to create new things. Obviously, the cars created all sorts of new jobs. Same thing's going to happen with the AI, but predicting how it's going to change is going to be difficult. But it also happens a lot slower than people are afraid of. It does feel all at once it happens. It feels like it's coming on fast, but you realize human adoption is very slow. How we replace things are very slow. There's still many companies out there that don't even have a website. It's been 30 years. So it's been, 30 years. So you got to imagine that some of this feels scary, anxious, etc. Stay on top of it, but you don't need to get over obsessed with it. It went right to that. Obviously, we're dealing with ethicals. I don't know if anyone saw, but as of yesterday, Google decided that they had a policy until yesterday that AI wasn't being allowed to be used for weapons or defense, and they decided just to scrap that yesterday, which, by the way, feels a little odd that you're going to have a policy until it actually applies and then cancel it. But yeah, so the ethical sides of this is going to be an interesting side of it, just something to keep in mind, as well as marketing. Like when you're talking about personalization, you're talking about something scraping someone's identity off the internet and then using it to target them. There's going to be ethical conversations. I personally feel like it's similar to the data privacy stuff. I'm not a big data privacy advocate because I kind of like that ads target me based on what I like, and I'm okay with my data. I'm also not really hiding anything. If they start using it nefariously, different, but using it to sell me something that I like, I think is actually an okay thing. So again, not to oversell it, but happy to give anyone a free demo or free trial on Hawke.AI here. It will go in, digest all your data, and show you exactly what's working. It does an instant SWOT analysis, so that's easy. Last thing, obviously, social media. Feel free to reach out to me. Also, I'll put my email in the WhatsApp. We wrote a whole book on this that we put out in 2022 that we talk about the future AI, but a lot of just modern marketing 101. Happy to send anyone a digital copy. It's been a bestseller, et cetera. But other than that, we got 5 minutes. Would love to take any questions. Yeah.
I assume this is mostly automated. How do you analyze the quality of your data?
Yeah, so the assumption there, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is all the data we're collecting is direct from platform. So whether it's Facebook, and at this scale, the idea is, yes, there's going to be some data in there that's probably off, but it's being averaged out in a way that if a few companies don't have their pixel placed properly, it washes out, and we do take out standard deviations and things like that. But at the end of the day, we're comparing apples to apples is the idea. So we're looking at their Facebook reported data compared to another Facebook reported data and 6,000 companies, and that's how we do it. There's no perfect answer, but it seems to be pretty good in that sense. And what we've seen, we actually have several hedge funds now trading off of our data because it's actually real-time data that is preceding all the quarterly reports for Facebook, for Shopify, for Google, et cetera. So the data they did a correlation study. It was like 99.3% accurate or something.
Are you at all concerned about data poisoning? Because we see stuff like Nightshade being used to poison images. Would that be a concern for your company?
Data. I'm actually not familiar with Nightshade, so
So what Nightshade is, basically, if you're an artist, you would put it onto your art piece, and if a AI tries to train off of it, it harms it in some way.
got it. No, because we're not scraping. We're plugging in directly with permission. So I understand like why that would be. And like the only thing that, kind of back to that point, that could really skewer data at all is if a company just completely screws up the plugins and screws up their pixels on all the different processes. What people do, but then we account for that. So that's about it. Like no one company can really screw us up because we're not training AI in that sense. Like we're training AI based on a data pool that then we're making sure that data pool is decently clean.
Anyone else?
Do you deal with B2B, and have you found any interesting differences in the data between the B2B and B2C?
It's actually the opposite. What I found, and we do a lot in B2B, I'd say it's about 35% of our business. It's similar, not different. And that's actually, I think, the fun thing. Like people talk a lot about, it comes up everywhere I go, is B2B versus B2C marketing. And what I think people forget is B2B marketing is marketing to individuals too. It's different decision-making process because it's more logic driven usually than emotional, but it's still people. And so people have similar behaviors to what they purchase in business as what they purchase personally. And so we found it's actually a lot of similarities, not differences, which is what we expected, frankly. Awesome. Thank you, guys.